Welcome to Retail Retold, the stories behind how that store landed in your neighborhood. I'm Chris Ressa, in conversation with the people and stories shaping retail and real estate. Brought to you by DLC. Welcome to Retail Retold, everyone. Today I am joined by Jason Olsen. Jason is the founder and CEO of Image Salon Studios. I'm excited for him to be here. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Great to be here.
Yeah, man. Been a journey for you. So let's let's jump in. Let's just tell a little bit about who is Jason, and we'll go from there.
Again, Jason Olsen, founder and CEO of Image Studios. We are a salon suite franchisor. We're based in Salt Lake City, Utah, with 120 locations in about 25 states across the country. I grew up in Atlanta, but moved out to Utah in 2004 to go to school, and then fell in love with the outdoors here and skiing, and then never looked back. So Utah is home. Love being here. And Love to talk more, about what we do and kind of our unique business model in the beauty industry and real estate industry, because our business is sort of a hybrid of both.
For sure.
Um, yeah, so it's definitely an interesting twist on traditional salons and spas.
Do you miss Atlanta? Anything about Atlanta you miss?
I mean, I miss some of the people for sure, but I don't miss the humidity. I don't miss the traffic. I miss the cheaper real estate because their real estate's still much more affordable than where Salt Lake's gotten. But overall, I'm happy to be here and consider this home.
The do you get in the summers? Do you do the hiking and all the things Salt Lake has to offer, or are you mainly a winter sports guy?
No, I'm both. So summertime, I'm trail running and hiking, and then as soon as it snows and we're in the resorts open, I'm hitting the slopes. Where Salt Lake's nice because we are, nestled right next to the mountains. And so there are one, two, three, four, five, six ski resorts within 30 minutes of where I live. And I'm, 15 minutes south of downtown Salt Lake. So it's super easy to go catch a few runs for a couple hours, go to work, during the week, and then get more time in on the weekends. But we have it really good. If you live in Denver or anywhere else, you got to drive 2 or 3 hours to get to a ski resort. But we live, right at the base of all these great resorts, which is awesome.
Yeah, that is cool. So let's talk about Image Studios. So walk me back to the beginning. How did it start?
Yeah, so I started Image. The first store opened in June 1st of 2010, but prior to that, I was buying and selling cars while I was in college back in 2004, and ended up getting a dealer's license while I was in college. Just because I was selling so many cars, I was required to get that license. So when I graduated school, ended up in a warehouse in Salt Lake selling some cars here and there, grew that into one of the largest independent used car dealerships in Utah. My little brother's my business partner in that. But I grew and scaled that to, gosh, we had 100 employees. We were doing 100 million in revenue. And then the '08 recession hits, and it was just devastating, and lots of PTSD from that time. And being in automotive retail during the Great Recession was one of the worst things you could be in. And I had always wanted to get into real estate. I had four rental homes at the time, residential rental homes, but that was a lot of work for a little bit of cash flow and a lot of headache. But I wanted to get into commercial real estate, but it was intimidating. Where do you start? Big down payments required. You've got to just all these other things I hadn't really been exposed to. And one day, actually, one of my best friends came in to buy a car, who was a hairstylist, and she was telling me about how she had just opened up her own business, but it was in a room. And it turns out she had moved into the very first salon suite that had opened up in Utah back in 2009, and didn't really make sense to me. But I went down a couple days later to go visit her and congratulate her. And I walked in, and it was a salon suite that was in a weird part of town in a warehouse with a really bad build out. And I walk in and all the rooms are full. People are coming and going with smiles on their faces. And the first thing I thought when I walked through those doors is I was, blown away. I'm like, what a brilliant concept. It's a real estate model. You're basically, it's real estate arbitrage where you're leasing large retail space, and then you subdivide it into co-working space for beauty professionals. But the things that I noticed was just what a horrible execution. And I spent 4 hours there that day talking to my friend and all of her friends that were there and just picking everyone's brain. I just wanted to find out, what do you guys love about this? What do you wish was different? And the feedback was really similar. It was, they all loved, working in their own studios, being their own boss, charging their own prices, working their own hours, decorating their rooms. What they didn't like was the space wasn't very pretty. It was not well maintained. The spaces were not built for their use and function. So the rooms that they were renting were not really, they didn't design them around how does a hairstylist need to work? Where should the sink be? Where should the outlets be? They were just building boxes and then renting them out to beauty pros. So this really piqued my interest because also this is still during the Great Recession, and I'm talking to all these different beauty professionals, and they're also telling me, my business has not been hugely affected by the recession. They had lost a few clients here and there, but it turns out, beauty is a very
Recession
loyal and
proof.
resilient industry. And I think part of what I was going through with the recession being a car dealer was just I didn't want to be around for the next recession. I had no fun going through that exercise.
So, just to back
Luckily,
us up, for those who don't know, can you give everyone, and I think it's probably pretty clear, but can you give everyone a little synopsis of why automotive retail during that time period was so tough? What makes in a recession automotive retail so tough? Is it just big purchase price items people pull back on, or was it more in that time it was that, but we were also in a credit crunch at that time. This is a highly financed purchase, and that caused a big issue. What was it, a perfect storm of both those? Give us a little taste of that, of being in automotive retail.
it was both of those factors. Buying a car is, the second largest purchase a consumer makes behind buying a house. And both of those purchases were put on hold during the recession because the people were losing jobs left and right. Unemployment was skyrocketing. Credit tightened incredibly tight after, all the subprime mortgage fallout. And so banks got beaten up with all their losses on their books, with all the repossessions and foreclosures. And so, yeah, credit got really tight. And then a lot of people just decided, like, I don't know if I'm going to lose my job or I may have lost my job. I definitely cannot be buying a car right now, And so those purchases got put off. Obviously for, probably about a year and a half, things slowed down quite a bit. We saw revenues drop 40% almost overnight once the big news hit that the recession, or the banking
Lehman
crisis.
Brothers, the Lehman
Yeah.
Brothers fell.
Yeah. So it's just like, it just spooked everyone. And then from there, you had this cascading effect of, the stock market crashing, and then that precedes layoffs in the general market, and then it trickles down locally, and then everything just slows down. So people were getting let go left and right, and yeah, just a tough time to be around. And luckily, we survived that recession, but there were many times that I looked at our books and just thought, I don't think we're going to make it another 2 or 3 months. Like, we just at some point you just run out of cash if you can't keep volume up on any kind of business, especially a automotive retail business where dealerships thrive on high volume because it's a low margin commodity business. There's about a 5% net profit margin on revenue for a good dealer, and so you've got a small profit margin, but you make it up in volume, and when volume drops, you've got you're in the red. And
Is that
so
just a real quick, a little car lesson? Is that net profit margin the same on new car dealerships and used? Is that typically the
no,
same?
no, new car dealers make less.
Less.
Um, yeah, yeah. Used cars are where there's a lot more money to be made. That's why a lot of new car dealerships make most of their money on their used car department. New cars just have a much smaller margin that is predicated by the manufacturer. So the dealers, net profit on a new car operation is typically 2 to 2.5% of revenue.
Wow.
I mean, you're getting really razor thin there. And then best in class used cars, are around 5% of net profit is about 5% of revenue. So it's about twice as profitable, but the being a franchise dealer has benefits because you have the prestige and value of the brand behind you as like a Mercedes dealer, which brings in customers who then become service customers for life. And then their kids or family members buy used cars from the dealership. So it's all sort of part of the whole when you're a dealer, especially if you're a franchise dealer, because you make money doing all those things, but you need all of them to build a consistent, stable, loyal customer base. Um, and
Got it.
so yeah,
I didn't think we'd be talking about cars, but it was super interesting. So, okay, do you still own the car dealership?
yes, uh-huh.
Awesome. You're still partners with your brother. Your brother runs that day to day.
Yeah, he's running it day to day. We're still cranking out there in Salt Lake. We're about the third largest volume dealer in all of Utah still. Um, and we've learned a lot over the years just from, I would say we also made a lot of mistakes during the recession because, I was not a sophisticated operator. I had not been in the business that long. We had seen a lot of growth, but then we really didn't have a great plan to pivot during the recession. And so when we went through COVID, 5 years ago, we had much better strategies in place to react to
So I'm going to
reprice.
ask you a tough question now. I'm going to ask you a tough question now then. What's one lesson you learned in the recession from your auto business that you applied during COVID to your beauty business?
Well, I think, I would say the biggest thing with in the recession was, your first loss is your best loss when you're negotiating on a depreciating asset, right? So when you're selling a car, if you have a chance to sell a car, and even though you're going to lose money, but you can sell that car, the reality is you should sell it to that customer today because in a month it's worth even less. And so your $1,000 loss becomes a $2,000 loss. And so I think one of the main things learned was just this, you really have to detach from ego and just realize like liquidating inventory and freeing up cash flow is key for any business, especially when things are slowing down. Now on the flip side with image, that doesn't really play a part because we don't have inventory, but the reality is that business is like 180 degrees different than a dealership because we have no inventory, no employees, we have this consistent cash flow coming in from the rentals from the beauty professionals every Friday. We pull rent every Friday. So it's like the opposite in every single way where I don't have frozen capital tied up in inventory. It's an asset light business and it cash flows really, really well because the end of the day, Image Studios is real estate arbitrage, right? How good of a deal can you get on a shopping center lease for 10 years with 2 5-year options? And then how much can you sublet each of those studios that you build out to a beauty professional? And that is your spread. That's your margin of profit between what you pay and what you can release it out for when you build these co-working spaces, similar to like a WeWork or any sort of office co-working space. Your biggest cost of goods on the P&L is rent, and your singular driver of revenue is retail rents. And so I think with, when you look at like negotiating LOIs with landlords, we also have learned just like when you're negotiating, if those landlords are coming back and they're just out in left field with they're not making any concessions and getting you anywhere you need to go, that's where we call it we call the game pretty quick on that and move on, right? We don't. So what happens is sometimes I think that's your indicator of a first loss is like it's not going to get much better if the landlord, is coming down 1% on the rent rate. You need to be here. It's just keep looking till you find that deal on real estate that's going to make that pro forma work. But what happens is people fall in love with real estate when they start looking and it gets emotional. And so, and that's the same thing. I would say, this is kind of a long answer, but I think it goes back to it's you've got to consciously remove emotion when you're making big decisions because those emotions can override logic. And a lot of times your intuition is more important than intelligence. And when we start falling in love with projects that we're negotiating, that we become like tied into them with our ego and we don't want to give up because we know this place is going to be a great location. The reality is if you're going to be paying too much, you'll be making less forever. And you don't need to do that deal. We need to look at it logically and just say, this is not the right deal. Let's move on. Let's keep looking. Because there's always a deal out there. It's just a matter of time. It's stuff's always coming on the MLS. Stuff's always dropping off. Um, some retailers going out of business that's not even listed yet that, maybe the local agent's going to find out about, but it's a patience game, right? It's a patience, but persistent game because when you're in site selection for any business, you want to get that store launched as soon as possible so you can start generating money and getting a return on your investment. But you don't want to rush it and make a decision that can haunt you forever because these commercial leases they're not insignificant. They're big leases, you know?
I know it. So, all right. So let's go back. So you start, you meet 4 hours with these people in this studio, and you're like, what happens next? You leave that studio. Now what?
Yeah. So I went home that night, started mapping out like basically an outline of a business plan of like, I just knew this was what I was going to do next. This felt right. It got me really excited. And I saw a big deficiency in what salon suites were when I started doing research nationwide. Was there was other brands out there doing salon suites, but it was the same thing. It was no frills space, tiny rooms. They weren't built for the end user. There was no customer service and really poor maintenance on the property. And beauty professional that's going to quit a job and open a business in a salon suite, the last thing they want to worry about is maintenance. They want the place to look good so it impresses their clients when they walk in. And I've really believed strongly that as a creative, as an artist, the physical space that they occupy should inspire the work that they do, right? Your physical surroundings, if you're a creative, should inspire your creativity. And so, at the end of the day, this is the beauty industry, and it's an aesthetic industry. It's a vain industry, right? It's all about looking good. And so I thought, gosh, why isn't anyone building beautiful space that looks and feels like a place you would see in New York, LA, or Miami, and building them in Salt Lake and Omaha and Denver and Houston and Dallas and bringing this beautiful space to beauty pros who are excited to take the next move up in their career and move into a place like this. The other deficiency I saw was there was no business training or support. So these, beauty professionals did not go to business school. They went to a trade school. And, I don't care who you talk to, you're not born good at accounting or you're not born good at business. You learn that. And so we wanted to be able to have an education program that was free for them, that allowed them to understand the core principles of running their own small business at a salon suite. And so I wrote the curriculum for our Image Pro business training program that we still do to this day. So every month we have a 2-hour course that's nationwide. They can jump in, and the different courses are about raising prices, planning for taxes, um, all the other things they're trying to figure out when they start a business, how to track expenses, what different softwares to use for accounting. And then we ended up creating our own smartphone app that is an all-in-one tool that is their credit card processor, their appointment scheduler and reminders. It tracks client notes, it tracks expenses, it gives them financial reporting. And so we looked at all the things that they need to run their business in a salon suite, and then we created an app around that, which is our Image Pro app. And so that then also solves a problem where people now have a all-in-one software tool they can use to run their business when they move over. Um, and I would, and then the other big differentiator with what we do is, the beauty industry is not just hairstylists. It's hairstylists. There's about 1 million hairstylists in the US, and then there's about 900,000 estheticians, nail artists, eyelash extension artists, tattoo artists, injectors that are doing Botox or fillers, eyebrow threaders. So all of these other types of beauty professionals were not being catered to in the salon suite industry because everyone was building space that was built around a hair station for a hairstylist. But what I wanted to do is there's, almost half of the TAM are other types of beauty pros that there's no space in the country for them. So the way we design and build our studios are very flexible and modular so that regardless if you're a hairstylist, a barber, a nail artist, or a massage therapist or a tattoo artist, we can reconfigure that room, pull the shampoo shuttle out, put a hand sink in, and make it work for anybody. And so because of that, our tenant diversity nationwide is around 52% hairstylists and 48% of those other. And that's a really big deal, actually, because when you have a co-working space and it's filled with all hairstylists, they're all competing, they're not networking, there's no community because they're really not like spending time together because they're not referring clients. And then um, the doors stay closed and it's an isolating, kind of lonely experience. Whereas at Image, because the clients that walk in want to go to everyone there because there's so many different services offered, the hairstylist starts referring to the lash artist, who then refers to the tattoo artist. And so they start building friendships, starts building a community. And then most importantly, you start to build culture, this intangible strength of a brand of why I belong. And that is what we do really, really well is we have a really tight community at each of our locations nationwide, which means these people spend time with us longer than they would at a traditional salon suite because there's more value. They get all the business training, support, tools, the better design and layout and function of the space. And then they get the access to the networking and the community that for no charge, these organic referrals give them more business and they don't have to go spend any dollars to advertise to grow their book.
Got it. Super helpful. And you said TAM before. That's for those who don't know, that's total addressable market. That's both the when Jason was talking about that, that's the hairstylist and the non-hairstylist. So going back, so you did this research, you figured out what you wanted to be, how it was differentiator. Tell me about getting to that. How long from there to your first location and walk me through that?
It was about, I'd say 8 months. So this was in probably fall of 2009 when I started the research. I flew to 7 different states over the next 2 months and visited about 50 salon suite locations. And back then there was 150 in the entire country. So I visited about a third of the whole industry doing the same research. I just wanted to make sure if I'm going to do this, because I'm not from the beauty industry. I've never been a hairstylist. So I wanted to make sure before I go down this road and potentially fail and lose everything, I really wanted to validate it. And the feedback from all those visits was very similar. It was very clear there was a need for a salon suite that was going to provide more. And so the first location opened up in June 1st of 2010 here in Salt Lake City. And the funny thing was, this is, back then build outs were a lot cheaper, but I did not have a lot of cash sitting around because I was bleeding cash at my dealership. And so I actually fell short of the build out by $110,000. And that was a very scary moment because as I had exhausted all my cash and then I had obviously used all the TI I got from the landlord, I was coming up 110 grand short. And so I kind of had one of those oh shit moments and I took out, I think it was 7 or 8 credit cards the same day, did the cash advance on each of those and pulled together 110 grand to get that build out finished with credit cards, which I would never recommend.
That's
But
some guts.
it also was sort of, I call that my all in moment. All the chips got put on the table and I just thought, you know what? Screw it. Like I'm in, like I'm already all in. I signed a personal guarantee. I've got a 10-year lease, but now I'm leveraged to the hilt. But also I knew, and I always tell people this that are looking at starting a business, you should be scared shitless because that fear is such a powerful motivator to really try harder. If you have not a lot of fear when you're starting a business, I can guarantee you will not be trying as hard as the person who is really, really scared. Because the fear is a powerful motivator more than optimism. And so, not that you should only be scared. There's a lot of excitement starting a business, but I look back at that time and I remember telling myself, if I have to go get a tiny little bit cut off the top of my hair every day just to go try and sit in front of another hairstylist and tell him about image, I will do it until I fill the space up. And luckily, I didn't have to do that because within 3 months, this 32 studios I built were filled. And then within 3 months, I had signed another lease for our second location that opened up 12 months on the dot from the first one. And then I opened up a total of 5 locations in 5 years. While I was still running the dealership, it was an enormous amount of work, but man, I was having so much fun just building something new and exciting and something that I felt really aligned with me and my creativity. And then started a franchise in about a year later in 2016.
So just backing up to that first one. So you did your first deal. How was that? How was that first site selection? How did you choose? How did you think about site selection on your first one?
Man, luckily I got introduced to a really good broker who has now become one of my dear friends and has helped me do all the deals on image here in Utah that I did. But he really helped me kind of see my blind spots and know what I should be looking out for on things I had no clue about. Right. And so I think there's a lot of things in a commercial lease you can get, wiped out on if you're not paying, careful
Sure.
attention. And luckily he was really, really good at educating me along the way, which was super helpful. And obviously it was good business to also make sure I got a good deal in all aspects in regard. Um, but it was just, he was a great broker. I think, getting with the right broker makes a world of difference. And then what was nice is after that second one opened, I had 2 stores in the market. Things changed when I would submit an LOI to landlords because landlords now knew about the brand. And I was starting to get inbound requests from landlords about space they had. They thought it was an interesting and innovative use of retail space. If they had vacancy that was 5, 6, or 7,000 square feet, they would reach out and email and say, "Hey, I want you to come look at this. I'd love to get you guys in." And so that it kind of changed from us begging to be considered as a tenant. Like that first one, I just had to beg. A landlord told me, he said, "What the hell does a car guy have any business in the beauty world?"
I get it. As a landlord, we're landlords. As a landlord, I would have been like, "What's
I would
going
do the
on
same
here?"
thing too. But
I would have.
you have no business doing this. You don't know what you're doing. But
So, so going back to that first one, so you make the deal. Credit card story is great. Now you get it built out. You got to start leasing the space. Talk to me about that first one, that process to get the stylists, signed up with you.
yeah, so it was again, word of mouth is a big driver in this. And luckily I had one of my best friends who was already a hairstylist who ended up being the first tenant that moved in. And then she really helped spread the word. And so just through her network and word of mouth, we, were able to open up at, I think, 60% occupancy. Um, and then
At that point, where did you need to be to start making money?
I think it was 53% occupancy.
Got it.
Well, was that break even day one before rent kicked in, which was awesome because, there really wasn't much cash left at all. And then within 3 months had it at 100%. And so that's when I realized there was a demand. There was definitely a need for a model like this that was doing it different, that provided better space, more support, better design and build out. And, um, and that's where it made it easy to keep expanding throughout Salt Lake. And then getting into franchising was a ton of fun, and now, helping build our brand across the country with our franchisees.
How many locations did you have before you decided you were going to franchise?
5 locations.
So you're at five. And you were coming from $100 million business in the car dealerships. This was much smaller volume wise, right? Each location, we're not talking $100 million per unit here. I imagine, we're in the somewhere. What's the AUV of an image today?
Average AV is about 650 a year.
Okay. All right, so 650. And then so different economics than the car business, obviously. And so you're at five. And what made you decide franchising was the way?
Um, I wanted to keep expanding, but there wasn't, a ton of room in Salt Lake to keep growing, and so then the next thing was, okay, now going into neighboring markets, Denver, Phoenix, Vegas. But when I started to weigh all the operational challenges of trying to remote manage stores and, all the debt that I'd have to bring on to scale more of these brick and mortar stores, that return on headache factor was a big deal. And franchising was made a lot more sense where, we make a lot less money per store with the franchise model, but allows us to scale a lot faster. And so in the end, it's a lot more valuable to build a franchise company, but you've got to have a business model that will scale. It's got to be scalable, which I had proven out with building, the 5 locations. I see a lot of people today and just in general business who build one location or one restaurant and they're like, "Hey, I'm going to start franchising." And I'm
I
like,
know.
you have no idea that you can prove this and replicate it. And even if they're like, "Well, what if I build a second one?" I said, "Well, then like first time you get you have to assume you're lucky the first time. Second time will prove you're not as lucky if you did it again. And third time proves you have a system and it's not luck. And if you can't get to three because the second one failed, you don't have anything to franchise as well. That's why you need to scale your brand and prove out the proof of concept at scale before you can expect others to want to do the same."
So the franchising process and being able to franchise a concept is not for the faint of heart. You have to put money into it. There's legal behind it. There's a whole bunch of stuff to be able to franchise. Um, you got your wits about you, and then after you get through all that, then you actually have to go out and get franchisees. And there's a lot of people competing for franchisees. How was that process?
It was tough. I mean, the first 3 years was just an enormous amount of work and almost nothing to show for it except massive amounts of money being spent to, keep the franchise business afloat. Um, but franchising's, no one wants to be the first few franchisees because you don't really have a huge support team because you don't need one until you have franchisees. And so it's this kind of conundrum you get in. And so your first franchisees, they're really buying into the founder because the founder is the one that's going to be supporting them along with the team. But like the founder's the one that's really the expert in this because they've been doing it since day one. So when we started getting more, the first 5 franchisees in the system and open, it then really started to get more traction because now we had better validation and more proof that we can help support franchise growth in addition to building our own stores. So,
I
yeah, yeah.
I have some familiarity with the franchising just from being a landlord, and I know sometimes one of the ways they try to give the early franchisees a better deal. That but then that makes the next franchisee set harder, and so um the the big pitch is you get your choice of markets, right? That's one of the big pitches. But as you one of the things that was interesting, I think, about your brand is there's not a ton of retail beauty franchise concepts. And therefore, right, food and beverage is dominating franchise concepts, right? And there's a lot of operators who are looking for an alternative revenue stream that's not just another restaurant brand. And so that probably started to have some legs for you.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps because food and beverage is crowded. But the nice thing about what we do, at a typical image studios location that's, 5,500 to 7,000 square feet, there's around 1,500 to 1,800 women a month that walk through our doors. And so for a landlord to diversify their tenant base, especially if they're heavy on food and beverage, this is great though, just because it brings so many consumers to the center that, are probably going to stop at the sandwich shop before or after their appointment, or the flower shop, or grab dinner or whatever it is. But there's a lot of, I mean, that's a lot of activity to bring to a center. So I think landlords love it because it's a unique tenant, unique concept, and it's a stable tenant, right? They don't have to really worry. We're in the rental business too. So it's a stable business that, we have no closures in our history. Our industry as a whole, there's just been a handful of closures in the salon suite industry. So it's compared to other industries in general, it's just way more stable.
So you started franchising, and now you're at 120. So you started in 2016 franchising. It was tough go the first 3 years. Now you're at 120. What's it look like today at Image Studios?
Yeah, so we've opened up about 21 stores year to date. And our total pipeline for 2025 would be about 38 stores that will open. So we'll have another 16 to 18 stores that open by year end. And then based on what leases are executed now and getting close to execution, we'll open probably about 42 stores in 2026. So we've really got some great growth ahead. We've got Yeah, we're in great markets with great franchisees and just excited to continue to grow the brand.
Awesome. So what does, in from 2010, when you were running your salon studio and you were going and trying to get hairstylists into your location, that day-to-day job is very different than the CEO of a franchise company that has 120 locations. And so what does your day-to-day look like today? What are you focused on?
Yeah, so overall just brand, how is the brand going to continue to evolve and compete? So that's stuff I'm always focused on, is how do we always level up what we're doing and make it better? I still work with every franchisee on every pro forma review that they're doing. So I'm personally approving or denying a pro forma before they sign a lease, because I want to make sure their unit economics are all in line before they commit to a 10-year lease. And that's what I love is, because of that attention to detail with the financials. Franchisees aren't, and I think in a lot of franchise brands, the franchisees are kind of left like, here's the playbook, good luck, and pay your royalty. Where it's like, we treat it more as a real partnership. We want to make sure they really get the best deal terms, because franchisors aren't paid on profit, they're paid on revenue. And most franchisors don't spend any time helping them analyze pro forma and how much profit they're going to make. They just want to make sure they're maxing out revenue. But I want to make sure they're profitable and making good profit so that they can not only open up the next two stores, but open up four, five, or six stores or 10 stores over the next 10 years. And so there's just a lot of, I think when you look at all the big things that make a difference, site approvals, we're doing site approvals twice a week, which I'm involved in, pro forma review, which I do. And then again, just, trying to look at the long-term vision and outlook for the industry and our brand, and making sure we're way ahead of our competition, and um, innovating and not reacting.
Awesome. Well, listen, Jason, this has been great. I appreciate the time. What didn't I ask you that I should have asked you?
That was pretty good. I mean, I think if people want to learn more, imagestudiosfranchise.com is our franchise website that'll have all sorts of info on the brand, um, and how it works. And then our corporate forward-facing website for beauty professionals is imagestudios360.com. And that's also great. You can kind of see a lot more photos and virtual tours of our spaces and how we position the brand within the beauty industry.
Awesome. By the way, your first few locations, did you keep them or did you franchise them?
The first few I ended up selling to our first franchisee to help raise money for the franchise, like starting the franchise, which was a great move that allowed us to be able to weather that slow runway of launch that it takes in franchising. So
Got it. Well, Jason, this has been great. I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much. Congratulations on all your success. Really cool story here, man.
yeah, thanks, Chris. It's been great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you watching. Hit subscribe. See you in the next one.